Well, I'm glad to see Science of Mind is alive and well in North Jersey, that's for sure. And I can hardly wait to see what your neighbors think after this. I don't think this is the Presbyterian crowd they're used to. But I got to tell you that I am so impressed. You know, you're not supposed to covet thy neighbor's anything, but this building I covet. This is supreme. This is good. Minute I walked in, I felt the energy. I made the connection. This is something that is definitely a manifestation. I said yesterday it was built the same year as Dr. Holmes wrote the Science of Mind text. So that, for me, I look for symbols and everything, you know. So it's pretty marvelous. It's pretty good. And Bill, thank God you're finally learning something from me. Yes, it's foyer, not foyer. Got it. I'm happy to see that my presence has added something to your life. What a community. You know, the building is great, and the building's everything. No, the building is really great, but you know, I'm just watching this community at work. When you all stood up because you participated, you notice I was the only person left sitting in the whole building. Me and a couple of new people. It's incredible. The level of enthusiasm, the level of ownership, the level of connectivity, and the level of spiritual community is just unbelievably alive and well here. And you're doing good work, Reverend Michelle. Good work. I want to talk today about community. I want to talk a little bit about service, and I want to talk about the meaning of it. You know, we're doing this theme Sunday that we're doing, and the theme for this month is service. It's seva. It's service to God, service to life, service to being. And what I want to talk about is I want to talk about who we are, well, where we come from, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. Because I think it's important when I come to a spiritual community like this to remind you that you're not alone. It's not just North Jersey that we're looking at. We're looking at probably 500,000 people in Centers for Spiritual Living. We're probably looking at 5 million people in the New Thought movement. And we're looking at this magnificent thing that we call our work. You know, we put before us a vision of creating a world that works for all, and that's a good vision. And we lay it out in front of us, and that's what we work, that's how we move our intentions to, that's how we make our decisions. If it doesn't fit that, then we're not going to decide to do that. We're not going to participate in a world that doesn't work. We're for something against nothing, which I'm sure you've heard many, many times. And so we find ourselves in this situation where we're moving as a tribe, let's say. We're moving as a spiritual community. Not just the 500 or 600 that are in North Jersey, but the 500,000 in Centers for Spiritual Living and the 5 million that are in New Thought, and then the billions and billions of people who want the same thing. And they come from a lot of different denominations. They have a lot of different beliefs. Most of them don't even know we exist, which is good because we probably don't know they exist. But we work together because what we want is we want a better life. And in order to get there, what we know is that we know that our job, as Bill shared, is about education. And the education isn't even really the purpose of it. The purpose of it is the transformation of what our belief system is, the changing of consciousness in the world around us. It is the elevating of the consciousness to bring us in to be congruent with what our desires are. It is really building ourselves and moving forward and developing ourselves as human consciousness so that we take the next step to arriving at the divine, the perfection, and so that we make the world a better place and leave a lasting result behind us as we move forward. That's not just me. I mean, that happens to be the job that is part of my title, or my job description, but it is you. This is what we do. That's why we're involved. And when you see this community come together to build something together, I want to let you know that the tangible, measurable form of the building is definitely magnificent, but the untangible, immeasurable form of the consciousness transformation that we take part in, that we help motivate and move is everything, is everything. And so we find ourselves in a situation right now in the world around us where you might have noticed there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff coming forward. Things that are jumping in front of us that are a little bit scary sometimes. And they're not the most comfortable thing to see. When we see the circumstances that have occurred in our inner cities, when we see the circumstances that have occurred with racism and prejudice, when we see this idea of terrorism that's coming over, which is really, really just a legalization of using somebody's name to be crazy out there. When we see all this stuff happening, it has a tendency, in my case, to threaten me. It challenges me. And when I get challenged and threatened, what happens is that I begin looking and seeking for something outside myself that's going to give me some consolation, some kind of comfort that I'm looking for. And it's communities like this that are developed and built that provide that comfort, that allow for that comfort to exist. That's why we show up and come here, is to evolve our consciousness and grow and know that we're not alone in that process and what we're doing and how we're doing it. You know, I'm going to tell you a story about where I think we are in the whole pattern and the whole fashion of consciousness development at this particular time, because this isn't the only time we've ever been in an area like this or a time like this. This has happened to us before in the past, and we've always managed to ride it out and rise to the top. And we can take comfort in the fact that consciousness, once expanded, as Wayne Dyer said, is like underwear. Once it's stretched, it'll never return to its same size again. And that's exactly what we do, is we kind of stretch out, and then in the past what has happened to us is we've kind of come back again. And then we stretch out a little bit further and then come back again. But what's happening in the consciousness and the evolution of humanity right now is that it's stretched out and it seems to be really wavering on coming back again. It kind of wants to stretch more. Do you get that feeling? And we see what's happening in the world, and they're all indicators of our need to be able to stretch a little bit more before we come back again. When I was younger and my children were little, teenagers, I used to take my daughter out. Every year I would take her out on some kind of a camping expedition, some kind of trip that I would take her on. And what I would do is I would arrange for a trip that we could do, that we could go and we could spend a couple weeks together and we could travel. She's 35 now, I think. So when she was 16, we went over to a group of islands that's off the west coast of Vancouver Island called the Broken Group. And the Broken Group is 100 or so islands that are situated right off Vancouver Island, right on the very west coast, right in the Pacific. And they're beautiful islands. They're absolutely a magnificent chain of islands that you can go to. And we sea kayaked them. And I went with my daughter. I took her and my sister and my brother-in-law and my niece. And we had 3 kayaks. We had 2 doubles, and we had 1 single. And these are kayaks. These are the skirted kayaks with the rudders and everything else. They're sea kayaks. And so we were going for 12 or 14 days, so we had to pack the boat. So we packed up enough provisions and enough gear to last us 12 to 14 days. And we set off from the west coast and traveled across the waterway until we came to one island. And then we would make a camp and enjoy ourselves. Then we would pack up and we would go to another island and we'd make a camp, and so on for 14 days. Magnificent piece of territory, a wonderful piece of ground, very, very sacred land. The islands, some of them are as close together as me to the neighbors, let's say. And that they abut each other, and there's channels that run through the middle of them. And the channels sometimes are quite long, and as you kayak through them, it was remarkable what you could see. A lot of the islands are sacred native ground, and you're not allowed to set foot on them. And the natives in that area, the Haida Gwaii, they would not bury their dead. They would hang them in cedar boxes from the old-growth forests. And these are all old-growth forest islands. So you'd be going through what would appear to be a river with just absolutely magnificent water. you could see down 60 feet in it, and you'd just be able to kayak through in these old growth forests beside you. And every now and then you would see a cedar crate tied to a tree leaning down a little bit. And you knew that hundreds of years ago that is where they had placed their dead, and that this was a cemetery, so to speak, for the native aboriginals. And you'd come around a corner perhaps and you'd see an old village with the old Haida huts and the totems down on the ground. They were deserted, but you could still see the remnants of the spirituality and the history that existed in it. They were magnificent places. As you paddled and as you kayaked, there were places where you could see the orcas crossing and see the whales come in and out, and the sea lions and the seals. And I always took my fishing rod with me and my crab trap, so that what we could do is we could make sure that we could crab at night when we tied up, and we could fish when we troll as we went through the way. And you're right at heart level. The water comes right through at your heart in a kayak, and so you're right with the land itself as you move through. And it's a magnificent feeling. And I remember I had a little rod, and every time I'd catch something on it, it was the only time in my life I ever prayed that it wouldn't be a big one, that it would be a small one, because you're in a kayak and it could flip so easily, and so you kind of, oh, please make it a small one so that I can bring it ashore. And so, we would travel, and we did this for like 14 days, and the weather was supreme. It was magnificent. And there's me and my daughter, my sister, who I love dearly, and my brother-in-law and my niece. And my brother-in-law and my niece were in one, and my sister was in the single by herself. And so we did several different islands as we went along. And finally we came to a place where we had to go across a large channel to get to the other island. And the problem was you couldn't see the other island. It was so far off in the distance that you couldn't see it from the island you were leaving from. So whenever you traveled in those areas, because of various reasons, you always carried a chart that you had before you, and you carried a compass on a lanyard around your neck. And everybody had one. You weren't allowed on that area unless you had such a thing. And the reason was to prevent you from being lost. And to cross this channel was called the Coaster Channel, and to cross the channel, what my brother-in-law and I did was we sat down and we worked out what the tidal ebb would be, and then we set a course and put it on our compass so we knew the direction and knew the heading we wanted to take, matched it with the chart, so we knew exactly where we were going to go to arrive at where we needed to get to. And it's all rocky islands, but there are beaches intermittent, so you have to be very careful, because there's no use coming ashore where there's a cliff. You actually have to find the beach to get there. And because of the tidal currents, you have to be fairly accurate in the boat to be able to arrive where you want to go. And to be accurate, what you need to do is set your timing on how long it's going to take you. And you have to start canoeing or kayaking, and you cannot stop kayaking, because if you do, what happens is you lose your time, and the drift will pick you up and move you, and you'll be off target for your heading of where you want to go, which is an estimate at the best of times anyway. And you have to appreciate that we were coming from the north to the south, and that as we were coming along there, that if we'd missed that island, we would have ended up in the open Pacific. And the next place would have been Hawaii, which is a long way from British Columbia. And the place after that would have been Tahiti, if you're lucky, and then maybe Australia, and then finally Antarctica. We definitely would have found Antarctica. But it gives you the magnitude of what you're doing. We come together to transform and evolve consciousness. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing as we're sitting in these seats, is we're waiting and we're willing and we're open to allow our consciousness to expand, to receive a larger idea of life, so that what we can do is we can apply it in our life and apply it in our world to help create a world that works for everyone. We're not here to hang on to the old way of believing, the old way of thinking that says violence is okay, or it says that prejudice or racism is okay. We're not here to hold on to it that says that in any way harming another human being is okay, or that withholding our good because we're greedy is okay. We're evolving our consciousness to understand that there's enough of everything and that everyone can live a life of quality, and that we take it upon ourselves to grow into that understanding and appreciation first and foremost, and to be able to move forward in that area. And we move in consciousness, like from island to island. What we do is we take off from a spot that we were at, and we kayak out, and the next island is another stage of consciousness. And then we pack up and we go to the next island, which is another stage of consciousness. Then we pack up and we go to a next island, which is another stage of consciousness. So we're constantly moving, evolving back into whence we came. Consciousness to consciousness, ever evolving back to the source itself, back to the divine itself. And that's what we're doing, always stretching our boundaries like I talked about yesterday, always growing those walls so that we can expand out. Now, where we are right now is we are faced with a situation where there is a broad expanse that appears to be in front of us. So the 5 of us were on the island, and we looked out, and we can't see the other island in front of us. But what we have is we have our chart and we have our compass. What we have is we have a pretty good idea of the indication, and what we know for certain is that that island is there. So we head off out of that island and we start moving across this channel called the Coaster Channel. And we start kayaking out and pick up our pace and get moving along, knowing that the chart is going to be accurate, and as long as we maintain our heading, we will arrive at the island. Now, in the metaphor that I'm speaking about, the compass really is our faith. It's what we hold to be true. And the chart are our principles. It's what we espouse to be true. It's what we state and who we state we are. You can find them in the organizational design model. Just do ODM CSL, and you'll see a whole list of the principles. And they're laid out before us, and the reason they exist is because we came to you 5 or 6 years ago and we said, what are your principles? And you shared with us what your principles were, and thousands and thousands and thousands of us participated, and then we voted on them, and we got 98% approval that these are our principles. This is what we believe to be true. This is why we're here. This is the spiritual truth of our being. It's got nothing to do with Dr. Ernest or Dr. Ken or Reverend Michelle or this building. It's what we hold to be true in the world, and what we know can manifest what it is we want. And where we are is we have set sail kayaking from an island that we used to know what it looked like, and we're out into the open water. And I'll tell you, as we were kayaking across that open water, there's a reason it's called the Coaster Channel, because it's a little bit scary sometimes. It's a little bit scary. You know, I was kayaking along, and I remember with my daughter, and we were kayaking along, and I could look over, and I could see my brother-in-law and my niece in the boat next to me over here, and I could talk to them. They were from me to the soundboard. So you could carry on a conversation with them on the water. So you had companionship as you were moving through. And then my sister was a little bit further off, and you could even talk to her. And we just kept kayaking, kept moving forward. But the reason it's called the Coaster Channel is because it has these swells in it. And the swells are huge. I remember once I looked over to see if I could see them, and they were there just a minute ago. And I looked back over again, and all of a sudden they weren't there. And my first thought was, where are they? And then I looked down, and about 4 stories, about 40 feet below me, I could see them kayaking in a trough of a swell. And so that was an interesting experience. It was pretty scary. And then the next time kayaking along, I'd look over, and it all seems flat, but I couldn't see them again. And then as silly as this sounds, the optics of it is incredible. I'd look up, and there they'd be, 40 feet up in the air, riding the top of the swell as you're moving along. So it was a fascinating place. And as we were kayaking, we were pretty much on chart, we thought. We were pretty much where we wanted to go. And we were following the chart, and we were following the compass. But there comes a time when you've left that land, and you're in the middle of it, and you look back, and you can't see any land behind you, and you still can't see any land in front of you. And then you begin to swirl. Your mind begins to go places, and you begin to think, oh, am I doing the right thing? Is it too late to turn around and go back? Maybe I could have found a different way. Do you really think I'm going to arrive at the island? Have I got the directions right? Am I headed on the right heading? How's the speed working? What's going on? What's the compass read? And so you just keep moving towards. And it becomes too late at that point to turn around and go back. You're already committed to this transformation. You're already committed to getting to the next island. You're already committed to expand your consciousness. You're already committed to growing. You're already committed to transformation in the world. You already know the difference between right and wrong. You already know what resonates with you. You already know what connects with you. You already know what you want. You already know who you are. So you keep moving forward. And God is your faith and the principles laid before you. You follow them, no matter what, no matter what. It doesn't matter what happens. Ferguson, Baton Rouge, Istanbul, Orlando. You follow your principles and you follow your faith. Because if you give up on it, what happens is you get thrown in to the race mind tide, to the current. If you stop paddling, suddenly what happens is you start drifting. And you go wherever the water is going to take you. And when it takes you to that place that goes back in time to the history and the antiquated concept of what happened 1,000 years ago, then the effect is going to be the same. So you travel as this team, as this group, as this family, crossing this large expanse of water. Kayaking, keeping the rhythm and the motion together to keep moving. No matter what anybody says or how they say it, you hold the principles in front of you, you follow your faith, and you keep going. I don't know if any of you know, but I'm sure you do, what a Pacific Northwest whiteout fog looks like. Where it drops and suddenly you can't even see in front of you. You can't see the head of the person in front of you. And this vertigo kicks in where it's really hard to find your direction and where you're headed and how you're going. And so we're kayaking, and we're at that place where you can't see the land behind you and you can't see the land in front of you, and the fog came in. Heavy, thick Pacific Northwest fog. I couldn't see my daughter's head in front of me. So we just had to keep kayaking. And I had to stop regularly and lean down in the boat and try to figure out what the chart said to make sure I was okay, because I could barely see the chart, and hold the compass up to my face so that I could see the direction, the heading we were going on, so that we could keep the heading going. And every time I did that, I had to stop paddling, which meant my daughter had to paddle even harder to keep the momentum of the boat going, to keep the float up, to keep it moving. And so we just kept moving forward. And we would call out into the white cotton batten, and we would call out for each other so we knew that we were there and we were traveling together. And we got going a little bit, and my sister, who was in the single, and I could only feel for her because at least I had the companionship. My sister, who was in the single, she became depressed. She became lost. And so she cried out for help. And so we had to stop in the middle of the channel and go and find her. And when we found her, what we did was we tied her boat to my brother-in-law's boat so that he could tow her and keep her connected to him. And so we wasted this time doing that, all the time trying to figure out what the chart said and where we were headed. And then we got back going again, and we headed in the direction that we needed to go. And Kelsey and I, they said, you guys can go ahead if you want. Go ahead and find the beach or do whatever. And no, you can't do that. What we had to do is we fell in behind to make sure that everybody arrived where we needed to go. That's what spiritual community does. There are times that you show up here and your compass or your faith is maybe shaky. There are times you might come in and you're way off the principles that you know to behold, you abide to be true. but you're off them. You've read the newspaper, you've watched the news, some horrific things have happened. I have fallen out so many times this last year. When I hear about Orlando or when I hear about another shooting, I find myself, people want an instant answer from me, and I can't give it to them. I have to go into the closet of my own mind, and I have to sit there and I have to clarify what I believe. I have to go back to my compass and back to my chart, and I have to restructure and redevelop it. I do. I know some of you do. I get people help me write these letters and white papers I do. And I remember one incident, I can't remember where it came from, it might have been Nice, but there were these things that came in and they said, Ken, I can't help you this time. I'm lost. I'm lost. And these are influential, intelligent spiritual leaders that are pulling us across the seas of consciousness to a new state of consciousness. And I just bless them. And then still have to keep paddling and do the work. That's why we come together in spiritual community. We come together so that we can help each other. So that we can tie our boats to each other when we need it. So that we can help people across these expanses. So the fog is thick, we can hardly see, and we just keep kayaking, and we're pretty sure we're going in the right direction. And in an hour or so, the fog begins to drift off and lifts, and we can see the island that we're headed to. And we could see a beach. And so we head to the beach, and we were on course. And we get to the beach, and we bring our boats up, and we set up a camp. And we stayed there for 2 days. And we fished, and we played with the seals, and we explored, and we looked around. We had a wonderful time. And then one morning, we got up, we packed our kayaks, we put them in the water, and we headed for the next island. This is who we are. This is the expansion of our consciousness in the world today. Where we are is we are between islands. And sometimes it feels like the fog is really thick and thereabouts. But I will tell you something. The islands are still there. The truth still lies before us. The destination is still there. And it's our responsibility to keep moving forward to get there. And so I come around and I speak to the congregants of the churches and the centers all over the world, and all I can say is thank you. Thank you. You are doing magnificent work. You don't even know it probably, but the work that you are doing in mind, the work that you are doing in living your life on the streets, at the place of work that you go to, in your homes, is transforming the world for the better to create a world that works. What I want you to know is that there are people here and people around you that are there if you get lost to help support you. And what I want to ask of you is that when you see people who are lost, that you reach out and help support them. We are blessed to have each other. This is the perfect weekend, the perfect demonstration, the perfect epiphany, the perfect place to be today to give this talk. And the reason is that you can feel it in every cell of your body right now with regard to the tangible form of something as magnificent as this. I want you to feel it in every cell of your body as far as what you're doing for the world and how you're helping it grow. So bless you. Know you're loved and honored, and thank you so much.